Hi guys, I've had a complete rethink about this video and I'm going to just express exactly what I'm thinking right now. 11 o'clock Hawaii or 11:30 Hawaii, that appears to be where we get the eruption happening. Now think about it this way, the apple with the 2 seeds and the 1 seed inside is 21. We've looked at it as a date reference in terms of 21 and 12, but what if it's a time reference in terms of 9 o'clock? 9 o'clock activity starts at Kilauea. By 22, which is represented by the V on Obama's forehead, which is 10 o'clock, the volcano erupts, and on Obama's face we have the volcano erupting. Then by 23, 11 o'clock, the tsunami is generated. That makes sense to me because 2 o'clock on the west coast, where we hear the 2 chimes, this tsunami wave is coming from the west. It's not coming from the east, it's coming from the west. This is coming from the Hawaiian side, that means from the west coast side. The time reference here has it at 12, but when we hear the sound, we hear 2 chimes, and even when we get closer to the clock tower, I don't know if I'm going to be able to show you here. Maybe a bit closer. Okay, let me see if I can catch it. Okay, so you might be able to see it just before the flag flies across. It's like slightly clearer, but there's a little indentation here right at 2 o'clock. So if Kilauea goes, if the tsunami from Kilauea is generated at 11 o'clock, the activity starts around 9, then that would be 2 o'clock on the west coast. Now that would be 5 o'clock on the east coast. Going back to the scene I just had, this is referencing the east coast part here. Hurricane Florence swirling at the moment. Inclement weather at sea, storm surges and stuff like that. But then we go inside of the clock tower. Just bring it back a little bit further. And we get the references to all these 5s. 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, all over the place. If that's the east coast, then it's 5 o'clock. We see in the background this tsunami sort of situation going on. That may not be a tsunami. It may just be turbulent sea weather, or that it could be a tsunami at the same time. So east coast could also have a similar situation. I'm not discounting that completely, but I'm emphasizing a bit more on what I'm seeing here. This is when the shark, as you can see in the background, you've got the shark here. There's the shark's eye, and that would be its gills as they're represented by the number 5s on there. Then you've got the submarine coming up out of the waves, and that is basically going to be on the 15th at 5 o'clock on the east coast, while on the west coast at 2 o'clock the tsunami wave should be hitting. If I think about it even more, the 21 inside the apple, which could represent 9 o'clock, could be when the actual volcano splits and erupts, and then it takes 2 hours for the tsunami to travel from Kilauea to the west coast. At the same time, 5 o'clock on the east coast, submarine comes up, or submarines come up, and 2 places are struck, in my opinion: New York and Florida. I believe that's what's being represented here. New York and Florida, and then the number 15 attached. So it will be the 15th on the east coast, the 15th on the west coast, but it'll be the 14th on, in Hawaii, which again, I think is why we're seeing the 14, the number 4, and the X combined together to make 14, and then the X and the 5 to make 15, because whatever happens around Kilauea in terms of the eruption, looking like 9 o'clock, happens on the 14th. Takes 2 hours to travel across the ocean, so it's still 11 o'clock on the 14th in Hawaii, but it's 2 o'clock, 2 a.m. on the 15th on the west coast, 5 a.m. on the east coast, which would be 10 a.m. in the UK. I still think the UK is obviously not the same day as you guys. We're 2 days later, on the 17th. Something happens with us, possibly connected with the Queen. I think maybe a dirty bomb or something like that in central London. One of the places I have been thinking about and actually visited, sort of just kind of rode past, is Aldwych Station in central London. It's a closed, disused tube station, but it's the location where the police conducted a terrorist drill associated with a chemical attack on the underground. And as obviously you guys know, referencing the chalkboard, the LTN possibly being London Transport Network, the can't really see it here, but the line and the 0 and the line and the V turned sideways make 10,000, and then this E, which is partially drawn here, actually makes ID, and then you've got the symbol of the dead person connected to, or 17, which could be saying on the 17th, death in terms of 10,000 people connected to the underground, which again could be connected to this disused station where they conducted this drill. You can't go in there to check and see if something's in there waiting, but I also wanted to make it a little bit clearer because I'm seeing the activity, the geological activity that's taking place in Alaska, and I'm thinking wind, Hurricane Florence, fire, houses exploding in Massachusetts, earth, Alaska over here with earthquakes. Water is the only missing large component. Obviously we've got some water going on over here in terms of flash flooding and storm surges, and it's possible, entirely possible, that we have the wind, fire, water and earth on one side as well as on the other side. But I think, now I'm rethinking, that we have a nuclear explosion up here, and that could be directly on land, or it could be that it is an underwater nuclear detonation which causes a tsunami around this area, and a nuclear attack around this area of Florida at the same time. Now this is slightly different because I had it as like a week later, but if we're considering it as times instead of dates, then it's possible that at the same time, about 9 o'clock, Kilauea erupts and splits off. Takes 2 hours to travel across here, so by the time it's 11 o'clock here, it's 2 o'clock over here. 2 chimes from the clock tower in the iPad Goat video with the huge tsunami wave behind. Then we're over here, 5 a.m. from the clock tower lady, and with the actual edge here, look, I pointed this out before, but this is her nose, and right here, I'll zoom in even more. Can you see her mouth, her long nose, her chin? Obviously this would be her hair. This is the old lady. This is Maryland, New Jersey, Virginia, of course, the Virgin Mary. Referenced by Donald Trump in the cryptic talk when he was talking about Puerto Rico, and I pointed that out as well, that he referenced Virgin Mary. This is also where the explosions took place along the Potomac River between Virginia and Maryland, which was leading up to Washington, kind of looking like a birth canal, and that was all associated with the Antichrist and the birth of the Antichrist. So the old lady appears to be here. If it's 2 o'clock on the west coast and it's 11 o'clock in Hawaii, then it's 5 o'clock here. We've got her pointing at number 5, and that appears to be when there's a nuclear attack, because that does appear to be what she's kind of backing away from the window from, backing away from the window for. I'll try and catch it, so if you guys haven't seen it already, then you'll know. Obviously we've got again reference to the heart over here, which could, you know, H for hurricane, H for heart, maybe. But that's not what I want to focus on. It's what you see in her eye. It's going to start around here, and it's going to come across a bright white light, which resembles a missile. You see it just starting there. It gets bright outside as the light in her eye gets brighter as well. She follows its path, sees the impact, and then all of this pressure wave starts coming towards her. And considering the old lady may represent Virginia or Maryland, the nuclear explosion is in the distance from her. So it could be that either it's out here in the ocean somewhere, the way that she's facing, which means a tsunami event would most likely be coming this way, or it could be that she's looking in this direction towards, for example, New York or even towards Washington. If that's the case, I'm not exactly sure where Donald Trump is at the moment. He's probably in Washington. That would tie in with something happening on the 15th in association with Donald Trump. And then we see the Korean Peninsula and the Middle East spiral out of control. 2 days later, it's the UK's turn. So I would still suggest on the East Coast looking at around 11:30 for any type of earthquake event. But if that doesn't happen, look out at 5 a.m. I know, you know, I don't know what to say in terms of are you going to stay up and wait till 5 a.m. and nothing happens and then it's just a wasted night of anxiousness and stuff like that. That's not what I want to do to you guys, but I do want to warn you of any possible scenarios that could potentially unfold, particularly during the night. So in terms of dates and times, it flows the 14th, 9 o'clock, Kilauea erupts 2 hours later, 11 o'clock over here, 2 o'clock over here, tsunami hits, same time, 5 o'clock over here, nuclear explosion, 1 or 2, I don't know, according to like the 12 blue figures with the 2 X's on their mouths, there's 2, 1 up and 1 down, which could be 1 up, 1 down, and then 2 days later, over to the UK. So please be very careful, please be watchful. I know there's been a lot of dates, I know there's been a lot of times, I know there's been a lot of scenarios. Believe me, I know, I've been making the videos, and as much as it's tiring for you guys maybe sometimes to hear it, it's even more tiring for me to actually research it and put it into a video that makes at least a tiny bit of sense. So, like, bear that in mind. I'm just trying to help. I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm not trying to be this doomsayer. But there are things that are going on at the moment that don't look right. And if I just see them and don't say anything and something does happen, I don't think I could ever live with myself. I would feel forever guilty that I didn't say anything for at least, you know, one person to be saved, or for, you know, a couple of people to be saved, maybe, or at least be aware that something might happen. You know, if you're on the if you're on the West Coast and you're awake at 2 o'clock, you know, it's just looking out for anything unusual that might be taking place around that time. Same if you're living in Hawaii. If you start, you know, feeling the ground rumble or anything like that around 9 o'clock, then you kind of know that maybe something's going to happen. The East Coast is a little bit more of a surprise for you guys because it's 5 o'clock in the morning. Most people are sleeping, and it's not like there's going to be any kind of warning apart from what you're kind of getting from, you know, YouTubers. 5 a.m. Yeah, I understand how hard this is for me to say. Um, I don't want that to happen. I pray it doesn't happen, but I cannot, in good conscience, possibly believe it will happen and not say anything about it. That for me is just the worst thing to do. So I hope you guys understand why I make so many videos, why I've got so many different interpretations and scenarios, and the way that things pan out. I mean, in terms of scenarios, they're less changed. It's always the same: tsunami, earthquake, hurricanes, and volcanoes, and all sorts of those kind of things remain the same. They just shift around in how they can be implemented. But it would make more sense for it to all be done on one day rather than a week, because obviously if you attack the East Coast, there's a much less likely chance that you're going to get a chance on the West Coast. But if you do them at the same time, in terms of time zones, one missile attack on Hawaii, maybe that's how. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's the two nuclears, one attack on Hawaii and one attack on the East Coast. Maybe it's like that. But both coasts, please, just please be watchful. The only times I can give you that I can see is 11 o'clock or 11:30 on either coast, or 2 a.m. on the West Coast and 5 a.m. on the East Coast. Have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and may the Heavenly Father keep and bless you.